morning. I'd like to call the meeting of facilities to order, 10:58 on January 22nd. Before we get started, I'd like to just read a little something. I'd like to thank Chairman Conover for giving me the opportunity to chair the committee this year. I'd like to thank Supervisor Diamond for doing a great job last year as chairman. We're going to have a lot of important issues this year, and it will deserve our utmost attention and due diligence, from courthouse issues to brownfield challenges, recycling concerns, county airport, on and on and on it goes. I can assure you that there will be a full vetting on all the issues from my standpoint as chairman. I will not cut off anyone other than there are time constraints at times, but I will give full vetting to any and all people on all the issues. I know that Don DeGraw and Kevin have been very supportive of being very fully transparent, and I'll insist upon that. I'd also like to thank Chairman Conover for, I was very insistent that we add a member to this committee. Her name is Ms. Bramer. She is an environmental lawyer, as we all know. I pushed hard for her to be on the committee last year. That didn't happen, but as chairman, I insisted that we put the very most qualified, best people on this committee, of which I feel she definitely is one of them. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, for conceding that and putting Ms. Bramer on the committee. Her knowledge on seeker issues and guidance on that just 2 years ago was very valuable. So that being said, we will now start the airport section. We're going to go airport first and then buildings and grounds. I already threw off Kevin already. First thing we want to do is motion to approve minutes from the prior meeting. Do I have a motion for that? Mr. Wild, a second. Mr. McDevitt, all in favor?
Aye.
Against? Passed. Okay, so we're going to do, everybody get out their airport packet, please. The first thing is action agenda and new business. Resolution request to establish Warren County as the lead agency. I'm going to let Kevin take this over and explain what he's looking for. So Kevin, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Resolution on page 2 is to establish Warren County as the lead agency for the seeker of state environmental quality review related to the construction of the 10-bay T-hanger project that we passed earlier this year. This is to determine the project seeker type, which we've determined as being an unlisted action, and to declare a negative declaration relative to the determination of non-significance under seeker. Basically what this is saying that we do not have any environmental issues associated with the building of the T-hangers. These are in the area where it's already a paved tie-down area, and the tie-down area will be switched to where the two old T-hangers are today. So really it's sort of in-kind replacement, but just with a newer buildings.
Discussion. Mr. Loeb?
I'll move that.
Mr. Loeb will move that motion, seconded by Mr. Strau. Discussion. Mr. Wild.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kevin, help me understand lead agency. Are we basically to the point where we're saying we want to do this and we're going to appoint ourselves the lead agency so we can give ourselves our own approval to make this happen?
That's correct.
Is there a little conflict of interest there?
We've vetted it through the short environmental assessment form that DEC requires us to do. We have no impacts. I don't know if that's a conflict if we've gone through the process.
Okay.
We've actually asked all the agencies for their input, and we usually give them a 30-day window to respond, and we've got no response from anybody.
Good. Thank you.
Further discussion. Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor of this resolution, say aye.
Aye.
Against? Passed. Okay, next on the agenda is number 4, pending and referral of items, which are none. We'll go right to number 5, information for discussion and review on the 20 hangar project update, and I'll turn that over to Kevin or Dan or Don.
I'll start it out, Don, and I'll let you run.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The hangar project that we were just talking about with the lead agency status for the county, We had the consultants do a estimate, the original estimate for the 20 Bay T hangars was approximately in the $1 million range, $990,000 range. There's been such a significant increase in steel costs that we'll be lucky now to get probably 10 of those for that amount of money. Don has come up with some solutions. One of them I have copies of here that I'll pass out and I'll have Don talk to him. But based on the steel prices today, we'll never be able to get 20. I'm gonna solve that, Mr. Chairman.
You're good.
With the amount of money that's in the grant funding right now. So these hangars, this option I'm passing out now would replace the 20 steel hangars with 20 what they call PVC tensile fabric hangers. And Don, I'll turn it over to you and let you discuss it further.
Okay, well, we're trying to come up with some creative solutions to get 20 hangars out of a $993,000 grant. Currently, it looks like one traditional 10-bay steel hangar is going to be $825,000, plus about $90,000 in consulting fees to make it happen. So, working with the consultants, they were looking at this product here, which is basically a steel structure with fabric on the outside, 25-year warranty on it, and it reduces the cost per foot by about 70, well, not per foot, but for the actual structure itself by about 70%. So we haven't come up with the actual numbers yet of what it would be, but it looks like, it appears at this point that if we were to use this type of structure, we could do it we could get 20 hangars for the grant amount. I'll have more for you next month when we get some more information on it.
Discussion, Mr. Sokol.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is this type of material covered through the grant monies? I mean, is it?
We would, before we did it, we'd ensure that New York State was satisfied with this. Yeah. We haven't got to that point yet.
Okay.
I'm not sure we specified exactly what type of building material in a grant, but we would ensure, New York State is, we've been in contact with them. They're very understanding of our problem, because they have multiple airports with the same problem. So they want their money to be put to good use, and they want to get those hangars out there. So I think they'd be open to it.
Mr. Stroud.
Don, would these be individual units for each airplane owner?
My understanding of it is it would be one large structure, just like a traditional steel hangar, with individual units inside.
And there would be doors at each end, so you'd have to move other people's planes?
No,
to
each person would have an individual door, just like a
Door.
traditional hangar. I think if you look in here, you could see, this isn't it, but it's the type of hangar doors that they would want to put on it. I didn't want a mechanical door, I wanted a...
Is this type of structure conducive to that, though?
I have to go by what the engineers tell me. They say it is.
Yeah.
They say it meets all the building code requirements. They just recently put one up at the Syracuse Airport, not as a hangar, but as a structure in the front of the airport. So when you pull up to the front of the airport, it's covered. It's a very large structure.
Mr. Sokol.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. John, I believe this kind of resembles like a climate-controlled storage facility. You got your facility, and then...
No, but you see the framework?
Yeah.
The framework doesn't look conducive to supporting doors.
Yeah.
They would have to, yeah, this is
They're
just an
individual
example.
units,
They would
though.
have to put steel structures in to ensure that the doors could be supported.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They put the framing around in this type of structure. This type of arch structure that you see in here is...
The base might be a different thing, and then the tensile part might just be what's on
Right.
top.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm open to seeing something like this.
Mr. Wild.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Don or Kevin, life expectancy of this fabric seems to be 25 to 30 years. So I'm assuming that's basically the same for the structure. What about the metal buildings? What's their life expectancy? And where I'm going is, where does it make sense to do with their money on the long term?
Yeah, well, the metal buildings we have there now are probably 40, 50 years old. So I'll probably double this.
So in a follow-up, is there any other grant money that we could apply to, that we could stack to this?
Not in the near future.
I'm almost wondering whether it makes sense to go with the more permanent building.
Well, the other thing to
Because
think
the rents we're going to get, let's talk about the math, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
The rents for being in the building versus the tie down, I think I saw something that wasn't significantly more per month or per annual. So what do we get for our money, basically is what I'm asking, right? So if we're spending 10% of $1 million, right, $100,000, what's the payback, right? So we could get a structure that holds 10, then we're going to get so much money back, or we can get a structure that we have to replace in half the time. You know, I'm just looking at the math, trying to look at the math and understanding what the economics tell us to do.
Right, so it's, each hangar probably yield about $340 a month. A second structure would be $3,400 a month to the county over the course of 30 years. And then we'd have to probably have to replace them in 30 years.
So we're not asking for anything here, we're just asking for us to
I'm just
pursue
giving
this.
you an update to where we're at, and then as we get a little more into it, I can, you know, if there's any specific questions, I can ask the consultant, I can come back and give you that information next month.
You know, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask for the economic study on this, to understand short-term, long-term, you know, looking out, knowing that we're going to have to come up with another $100,000 potentially to replace this in 20 years, 30 years.
Don, could you bring that information to next month's meeting?
Yep.
With you? Thank you. Claudia, did you, Ms. Brandon? did you have a-
That'll be great information to have. That, my only thought was thinking politically, is there any sense of steel prices going back down anytime soon?
Could in the future, but I can't predict them. They've been rising for the last 2.5, 3 years now. When this estimate was originally done, it fell within the ballpark of being able to do 20 hangars. Now we're not even close.
And that's just an estimate for the 10 bay.
Right.
And it's, there's not a lot of wiggle room between 915,000 and 93,993. So if this came in a little higher, it's just a chance we could be over the grant amount.
So next month, then, you'll come back with the economic breakdown for us,
Mhm.
and obviously, the two options, and we'll have to make a decision next month on what, well, we don't have to, but more than likely, we'll make a decision on what way to go with this. Is that correct?
Yep.
Is that the feeling of the committee? Okay. John, did you want to say something?
Well, just when we kind of get the design etched out, I'd like to see the comfort level with the pilots who would be renting these facilities. Because if it's an open facility where I can go in and take my neighbor's tools, for example, I may not be comfortable with that.
Fair question.
So, you know, we should probably run it by the, Pilots Association maybe.
The other thing to think about is we do have two 10 bay hangars now that are in an advanced state of deterioration. And it's possible, especially with the weather we have here, heavy snowfall, we could get in a situation where we have to tell these guys they can't stay there anymore. And then we'll have 10 planes sitting on the ramp.
Yeah.
So, so if we only do one 10 bay, sooner or later we're going to have to take down another 10 bay because the bottoms are all just rotted out. There's no structure left to them.
Yeah.
So,
Let's factor it all in.
yeah, yep.
Okay, any other discussion on that? Okay, I'll close the discussion on that. The next one, Don, you're going to talk about?
Yeah, I just wanted to give you an update. As you guys know from the negotiations from the FBO contract, we picked up 18 hangars and 5 tie-downs on the upper ramp. I've been working this month to get everybody signed up with a lease and collect at least their first month's rent. And to date, I've got 20 of 24 leases signed, which is good. Only 4 leases left. And I've collected over $10,000 because many of them paid for the whole year or a couple of months in advance. So we're right on track with what we were trying to achieve as far as taking those hangars over. So good news there.
Mr. Loeb?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. What are these 18 hangars? Are these the 18 hangars that are falling apart?
12 of the 18 are.
Yes,
Chairman,
Mr.
do we have any obligations as if the hangars that we're leasing now are falling apart? It seems that we're making a commitment to the pilots, to make sure their aircraft are safe. So that also has to go into the calculation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Any other discussion on the 18 hangars? Yes, Mr. McGowan.
So if I'm understanding this right, we approved for 20 hangars, but we're finding out today that just 10 hangars are going to be for $915,000.
That's
If that's
the
a
that's
big
the current
amount.
cost estimate, yeah.
And we allotted how much for 20 hangars?
The grand amount was $993,000.
And that's mainly the increase of metal?
That's what we're being told.
I think.
Okay, see, any other discussion on the 18 hangars? Yes, Ms. Kramer?
Not on the 18 hangars, but on that, could we go back to New York State and ask for more grant money?
I think
Yeah,
Mr.
no.
Wild asked that question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Answer.
Well,
I'll face this way when I answer.
The answer
No, step on this side.
and unfortunately, the answer is no.
But they are willing to work with us on the scope of the project. So they are being flexible.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is the runway extension project update. An updated response to the FAA questions related to the proposed new alternative was submitted to the FAA on January 4th. No further action is being taken on EA number 4 until the FAA responds back to the county. Amanda has the latest response to the FAA on file if anybody would like a copy. I've asked Amanda, and I believe I've told everyone, to have a file open on all communications with the FAA, the DEC, the Army Corps of Engineers, any correspondence to and from the county or any agency. And you have now, Amanda's going to have a file called Airport File, and anybody on this committee, as well as anybody on the board, has total access to any communications that will happen out at the airport. This is something new, and I want to make sure everybody has the opportunity to be in the total loop of what's happening. And Don and Kevin have assured me that all communication will be sent to Amanda besides myself, and you now have all access to what will be called the airport file. So do you want to just talk briefly on this, Kevin or Don, on the runway extension project update?
We can. There's not much more to talk to except what's written here is we did submit the new alternatives to the questions that FAA had asked. Some questions came back, I think, from the public. We addressed those, and we're just waiting on what the FAA response is going to be.
Discussion? Ms. Bramer?
Thanks. And thank you for the transparency about the communications, and I'd like to know if that's going to include the CNS communications that go directly to FAA.
Yes.
Okay. And Kevin, when you said that the questions from the public were being addressed, were you talking about Travis? And did
correct.
information go to FAA as a result of his questions, or you just internally you looked at them and...
No, they went to, that's the...
That is the most recent thing.
Yes.
They went to okay,
Yep.
thanks.
Any other discussion? Privilege of the floor. Does anybody have a question? Mr. Whitehead.
Yes, I've had a question for a couple of years now, and I asked Mr. Beatty to ask Mr. Roth if he could give me an estimate of the number of times that a jet leaving from our airport had to go such a distance that to their final destination that they couldn't make it there without stopping for gas somewhere along the route. And the reason I ask for this is that our purpose and need for the extension, to a very large extent, has to do with satisfying that complaint. That is that you'd have to stop for gas at times on a very long flight. And I'd just like to know the number of times a year that might occur, and what, if you could give me some examples, I'd appreciate it.
Mr. DeGraw?
Okay, well, I was actually planning on doing this in February, so I'm not fully prepared, but I'm about 95% prepared. It doesn't happen a lot. And what I did was, so basically, just so everybody kind of gets in the same thought process as me in the room, we have about 400 jet takeoffs a year coming out of the airport. And about 60% of those 400 are from base aircraft. We have four jet hangars at the airport. So what I do is I try to go to each individual chief pilot at those hangars and ask them that very question. The pilot who responded with the times that he most often has to stop in between is actually here with us today. It's Tim Maloney. Tim, how you doing? Raise your hand. So I can have, instead of me trying to answer it, I can have Tim answer it. But I think that Travis, you threw out the number. You'd be surprised if it was more than 5 times a year. Is that true, Travis?
I said that.
I would probably concur with that. That's probably accurate. Because 3 of the 4, their missions are pretty much within the capability of their aircraft. And Tim flies the Hawker and the Falcon, and many times his mission is outside that envelope, and he does what he has to do, and I'll let Tim get up and speak. If everybody's okay with that, I'll introduce Tim, and he can get up and answer some of it. So Tim Maloney, he's a chief pilot in Hangar 2. He's been flying out of Glens Falls for 35 years, and since 2006 he's been flying a jet professionally out of Glens Falls. He has the most experience of any base jet pilot I could find at the airport, so I would say he's our senior pilot, leading most expert in what we're talking about today. And I'll let him get up and introduce himself, and just, Tim, the mic's right there, Tim. The mic.
Would you go to the mic, though, Mr. Maloney? Yeah, would you go to the podium? Thank you.
So the reason I invited Tim here today was, one, a lot of times we're asking these questions, and you're asking it through me, and then I'm trying to reach out. It's great to go right to the person who's behind the throttle and handling the aircraft. And the other reason is, why do we need a runway extension when you can fly to Milan, Italy, nonstop on 5,000 feet? Well, that's the guy who's flying the plane right there. And when we talk about that aircraft operation, he was the one behind the controls making the go, no-go decision, and he can enlighten us on his thought process and his thoughts on additional runway.
Mr. Maloney, go ahead.
Thank you. As Don said, Tim Maloney. I work for New Country Motor Car, and we have 2 airplanes right now. In 2005, we purchased a Hawker 800. It's a mid-size cabin class airplane, 8 people. It's a 28,000-pound max takeoff airplane. In September of 2016, we took delivery of a Falcon 900 LX, which is a little larger cabin. It seats 14 people. It's a 49,000 max gross takeoff weight airplane. And I'm here today just to voice my support for a runway extension, number 1, from a safety perspective, and number 2, from an operational perspective. When we first got the Falcon, we had a trip to Italy, and it was in the summertime, and certainly the summer temperatures dictated we had to go to Albany to fill up with gas to get there. And there's been instances as well with the Hawker in the years past where, with the light summer winds aloft, we could get to California, but with the temperatures at the airport in the summertime, we couldn't take the necessary gas because of accelerate stop considerations. So there's a lot to really factor in your flight planning. Number 1, you want to, if you're going across the North Atlantic, you want to take as much fuel as you can because there's certain contingencies. You have a point of safe return. You have contingencies for a depressurization where you have to go down to, say, 10,000 feet. You have a medical turnaround or go based on incapacitation or people becoming medically necessary to go somewhere as quick as possible. And if you lose an engine, you'll have to descend and burn more fuel. So those are considerations for fuel. The other consideration, one of many for planning a trip, is the available distance to take off. You want to have a balanced field length, which means you can only get to a certain weight based on, usually fuel is the consideration for that. You want to be able to get up to your takeoff decision speed and then stop safely. So I've heard people talk about the Milan flight that went on October 31st is your Halloween night. I went to Milan. And that was tough. We wanted to take more gas. We could take a little under, I think it was 17,500 pounds of gas, and we can take 21,000. And obviously, if you're going over the North Atlantic, you want to be able to take as much fuel as possible, just because of those contingencies. Was it doable? Yeah. And we watched the weather really closely as we were planning our fuel, and even 1 or 2 degrees centigrade makes a lot of difference. And we had planned that for our accelerate stop distance of 4,800 feet on a 5,000-foot runway. So we were right at the max. If we could have taken more fuel, it would have made me a lot happier. So those are the considerations we're up against with this. As far as like giving you the amount of times we've done that, it kind of paints you into a corner. What's the mission you're flying that day? It all depends. If we want to go to the use the complete and entire capability of the airplane, there's a lot of times we can't do that. I would say that 5,000 feet is probably the minimum amount of runway you would want operating a high-performance business aircraft. So I'm just here to voice my support for the extension, and I'm open to any questions anyone might have.
Any questions? Mr. Whitehead.
I can fully understand why, you'd like an extra 100 feet, or 500 feet, or whatever. I guess if I were in your shoes, I wouldn't mind seeing it either. But then again, I'm paying for it, I can't hear it, to use it. So, I'd love to have a set of lanes from here to Albany, just for me, because the main problem is the drunks on the road, and I could get rid of them and I could just drive there, it'd be safe for me. But I don't think you guys are going to pay for another set of lanes to go down there either. But the fact of the matter is, when you step into that, when you're piloting command, you punch those numbers in, and it comes up and says, you can't make it safe. You don't have an option. You fly to Albany, or you fly to Gander, or you do something. 50 years ago, everybody went to Gander. Put negative across the thing without refueling there. Mr. Skimmerhorn had to go to Gander recently when he went to Stockholm, Sweden. His Challenger 300 can't make that trip without, no matter how long that road is. So, at any rate, the question was, how many times do we think it happens in a year? The answer was probably less than 5. And from that standpoint, we are talking about $10 million or maybe a $3 million investment. And I'm just glad that's finally out on the table, because it's taken me about 3 years to get that answer.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Dr. Schwenker.
Travis talks about stopping for gas like it's pulling into the mobile station on the corner, but my impression is that the cost, both of engine time, fuel for descending and climbing again, that it's, besides adding significant time because of routings. What's it cost you to stop for gas in Tulsa on your way to California?
Oh, quite a bit, yeah. And it's the extra time. There's a couple $100 for each engine every hour you fly to put into for maintenance, insurance and things like that. You have a great airport here. I think your vision of what it is and what it should be is up to the people of Warren County, absolutely. But for if you want business aircraft in here and you want to increase the traffic, I think 5,000 feet is the bare minimum. We have to get approval from management companies when we, like say, a 4,700 foot, 4,600 foot runway, we can barely operate, and things have to be perfect. So, it's up to the people of Warren County and the representatives what they want to see the airport. But for me, it makes perfect sense to add on to this runway if you want to bring more business-oriented, high-performance aircraft in here.
Thank you, Mr. Maloney. I'd like to make a comment. My brother-in-law worked for a guy named Phil Morris, and he said they were going to Europe or something, and they had to stop and get gas. He said it took them 30 minutes to get down, get the gas, and get back up again. So when I said, well, isn't that a big inconvenience? He goes, no. He goes, no. Was it 30 minutes of our time? Yeah. He said, but the reality of it is to spend millions and millions of dollars because we're inconvenient for 30 minutes, he says, I can't support this. So, we all have personal individual stories probably, but the fact of the matter is I think the big question today was how many flights, how many jets were inconvenienced or couldn't take off, and it was 5 or less. And that's a huge statement that we've been trying to find out for years. And I thank Mr. DeGraw for providing that information. I guess Mr. Whitehead was right all along that it was 5 or less. Are there any other positions? Mr. McDivitt.
Yes, I'd just like to make one observation, if I can. The question came up as to who pays for this, and I would suggest to you that the people that actually, in reality, that pay for this is the consuming public, are the people that actually fly the airwaves on a daily basis and pay a fee for the opportunity to fly in the safest aeronautical environment known to man. So that's really who's paying for it, okay? And what's the point of this payment structure? It's that the pros in the world, the members of the FAA, understand that this is a reasonably painless way to ensure safety in our skies and to ensure economic growth in the rural parts of this country, if not this world, okay? So who's paying for it? The consuming public is paying for it. The people that use the airwaves are the human beings that are paying for an extension of our airport. So I'm happy and thrilled that Don has come forth with an alternative to the plan. So the $3 million is really not $3 million. Okay, is it 5% of that as far as the county is concerned? But 95% of the cost is paid for by the consuming public that fly the airwaves, not tied to our taxes, not tied to our national debt, separate type accounting system, safety in the skies, and promoting potential economic growth in rural parts of the country.
Mr. Weil.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to elaborate on what Supervisor McDivitt said, and I think it's true. One thing that may not be clear is that it's the flying public, not just fly out of Warren County, but anywhere that use our airports. If I fly to Florida, if you fly to Florida, if you fly wherever, there's a tax that goes into this pool of money that's used for things like this. So it's not just the people that fly out of Warren County Airport. Secondly, I think to position this as such that it only benefits a few pilots, it's a much bigger question than that. And it truly is a question of economics. People say it's not worth the money. I'm not sure if we can justify it that it's going to help the economy or not help the economy. And that's what I'm looking for, is to get a better picture of that. Just because 5 planes have to stop for gas isn't a big determining factor in my mind. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. McGowan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Being a builder, most of my life, and one of the firm believers that I have is really having your infrastructure in place at the time that it's needed. And I was really dead set against it, but I have to say that it's been much more interesting to look at now that Mr. McGraw's come up with a plan of achieving some of the goals that we need for safety at really at a third of the price. So it's just something I want everybody to just keep in mind. You know, really having your infrastructure in time and it's needed and what it could bring to us in the future is it's hard to predict. But then on the other hand, too, you know, hate to miss up on an opportunity like this. So.
Any other discussion? Mr. Stroud?
Well, and there have been 3 economic impact studies that have been done on our airport, and I believe the most recent one said that the airport brings in about $10 million worth of economic benefits directly and indirectly to our local economy. And not only that, but if you remember, we had a discussion with one of the folks from Genesee County who went to an extended runway, and they said just in fuel cells alone, it more than paid for the extension and improved the local economy. So, you know, those thoughts have to come into play too.
Mr. Loeb?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. McDivitt's comments about the flying public paying for this is true, but I would say with confidence that most of the flying public is not aware that they have to pay for it. I will also say with confidence that all of the flying public expects 100% safety when they get into an airplane and are flying. They don't want to get involved in the discussions. Is there enough weight? Is there enough runway length to handle the fuel or capacity for the aircraft? They just want to get on that aircraft, and the pilots want to get on that aircraft and know that nobody's cutting corners, nobody's requiring them to cut corners. They want 100% safety, and I think that's the direction we're trying to go, is that we're making this airport a safe airport to fly in and out of for any pilot at any time.
Ms. Bramer?
Well, I
Sorry,
wanna say-
were you done, Mr. Loeb? I'm sorry.
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry.
What Supervisor Loeb just stated, though, implies that the airport is not safe, and it is safe. It is one of the safest around, according to our lack of any A, problems, but B, any sort of notification to pilots that they need to take safety precautions as they're flying in, like trees, and we've done everything possible to make that airport as safe as possible. So I don't want the public to read some article saying that the airport is not safe and that we need to extend the runway by an extra 1,000 feet. And to Supervisor Stroud, yes, the airport is already an economic benefit. We have not seen anything that spells out, yes, if we put this extra 1,000 feet, we are going to get new business jets. We haven't seen that. We've
Genesee
heard
County.
anecdotally.
Genesee County.
We've heard from this gentleman right here
County.
today, but where's the information? We already have business jets at our airport based there, right? How many jets do we have based at our airport now? 5 business jets, and they take off 400 times a year. Okay, 60% of that.
I'd like to remind people of a few facts. Number one is, I had a discussion with a man called John McMichael. He was one of the biggest builders on Lake George. He has people in jets fly into Warren County all the time. He has since passed away. I'm sorry for that. But I said, he was a supporter of the runway extension. I had a discussion with him, this about 3 years ago. He said, Doug, I want the extension. I said, okay, why? He says, well, so jets can come and go. He says, I get customers all the time coming in to see my homes on Lake George and so forth, and these are big-end customers. I said, well, let me ask you, John, has a jet ever not been able to go to Warren County to see one of your buildings? He goes, no. They've always been able to land and take off. So the airport runway length is not a problem then. He goes, well, when you put it that way, no, it's not. Well, we always could use more runway length, he said. Well, so then I referred to a guy named Phil Morris. He sent a letter to this very board about 4 years ago stating, if anyone thinks, basically, I'm paraphrasing, that extending the runway 1,000 feet will bring in more economic, or more jets and so forth, is a misnomer. He goes, no, I know people aren't going to want to hear that, Now, by the way, Phil happens to have had the largest jet out at the airport. He said, but the fact of the matter is, it's not going to bring in new business. It's not going to bring in bigger jets. What it will, he says, my recommendation is concentrate on the businesses you have here in Warren County and try to get them to grow. He said, but, so I can get that and I can supply that letter to anybody who wants to, and so forth. Now, Saratoga County, which is 15 miles north of us, or south of us, excuse me, has 3 times as many flights as Warren County. 3 times. So probably they've got a longer runway. No, their runway's shorter by about 320 feet. So they got a shorter runway with 3 times more flights. Now, somebody could say, well, isn't that safer? Or that's not as safe. Well, obviously, according to some people, it wouldn't be as safe because it's a shorter runway. But they have 3 times as many flights. So we got to put things in perspective. And spending dollars, taxpayer dollars, whether it's funded through people actually flying, whether it's funded through 5% of the county taxpayers, whether it's funded through 5% of the state funding, which is 95 and 5, if the project doesn't bear merits on its own weight, then really should we be talking about going forward with that type of project? So one final comment is, I believe Warren County is rated as one of the safest airports in New York State. So again, that misnomer that we're not safe couldn't be further from the truth. Yes, Mr. Strauss?
Yes, Albany Business Review had a very good article. Business jets are the wave of the future. Business jets are the fastest growing segment of the aviation industry. Business jets are what make economic opportunity happen in your community. And they went on to mention the advantages of having and accommodating business jets. And, and if you're thinking of Warren County, you got to think of the future here. I mean, are we going to go to an Uber in terms of business jet worlds? And the fact is, yes. Are you going to be able to use business jet for freight? Yes. Actually, business jets are being used for freight. So when you're talking freight, you're talking longer runways and everything else. And I had a phone call from an individual who is from and worked at an airport that went to a longer runway. And he said, John, you wouldn't believe the secondary impacts that had in our locality, the number of businesses that started to move in because we were able to accommodate better and safer. Sure, we're safe, but it's safer. Business jets, it really opened up a lot of economic opportunities for our county. And he said, really, going to the runway extension is a no-brainer. So we could go on and on, but there are a tremendous lot of benefits to going to a runway that will cost you just a Subway sandwich.
Well, I'm going to end this discussion because we are way past time. I'll give one last shot to Mr. Loeb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the discussion input by everybody. With that in mind, because we've been working on this we were working on it heavily when Don was here before. I would like to make a motion that motion as a vote of confidence that we continue on with our plans for a runway extension. And if we don't have a vote of confidence, then we should just stop this right now. So I make that motion. Not
I
approval,
believe
but
we
vote.
already have approval for the extension,
Well,
Mr.
then
Loeb.
why are you, Mr. Chairman, why are we even having this discussion?
I believe Mr. DeGraw brought in an individual who wanted to speak, and Mr. McDivitt wanted to opine, and Mr. Wild wanted to opine, and Mr. Strauss wanted to opine, so...
Don't forget yourself, Mr.
And
Beatty.
Mr. Beatty wanted to opine, too.
I make that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Garrity, I forgot I opined.
I looked at the rules of the board like you told me the chairman wasn't supposed to opine.
Well, actually, that's the chairman of the board and not the chairman of a committee, so thank you.
A little fun with you, Doug.
Yeah, I know, I appreciate that, but that's the chairman of the board. Since I'm not chairman of the board, I can opine, maybe next year. So, we're going to close that discussion now, and go now. I believe, are there any other discussions or privilege of the floor for the airport? Otherwise, we'll go to buildings and grounds. Okay, let's go to the buildings and grounds section now. If you'd get out your pamphlets and so forth. We've already called the meeting to order. That's all done.
I'm going to jump out.
We're going to go right to, you don't need to approve them. We're going to go right to number 3, action items, new business. Kevin, you want to request to propose an easement for the Leo Auto Group?
That's correct. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Leo Auto Group came to me back in December, actually a little bit before that, back in November, to ask if they could do a easement on a piece of property that butts up to our emergency training center. Our piece of property back there is basically a landlocked piece of property. The only thing that we could possibly use it for in the future is something affiliated with the emergency training center that Brian LaFleur has back there. For Leo Auto Group to tie into the town sewer system on Quaker Road, it's right in the middle of the intersection of Quaker and Dix. We'd rather them not go that route, so this would allow them to have an easement through that parcel, which brings them right up to the National Grid's pole line, and that's where the town has an easement with National Grid for their sewer in there. So this would allow them to tie in the sewer. It's 50 foot wide. It's just an easement. We can reclaim this property anytime we want. It's just giving them the easement to use.
Mr. Simpson moves it. Mr. Garrity seconds it. Any discussion on that? Mr. Wild?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kevin, you know, I didn't see the big picture in terms of the layout of the property that we have, but is this easement going to interfere with anything you might want to do in the future?
I don't think so. We have, I'm not sure what the size of the lot is back there. I don't have it in front of me. Actually, maybe I do right here. No, I don't. I just have the tax parcel number. It's a fairly large piece of land. As I said, that property is landlocked. You can't get through it from Quaker Road or Dix Avenue because Leah and all those groups, we have no access through there. The only access is through where Brian LaFleur has his emergency training center. So that would be the only access. This would kept it way over to the westernmost property line, 50-foot swath. We still have, I want to say it's probably a 4 or 5 acre parcel there. I don't think it's going to impact it.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? Ms. Bramer?
What do we have that land for?
I don't know when it was taken. It's on our records. We've had it for a long time. It's probably, it backed up to the airport property. That's where Brian LaFleur's emergency training center area is, back up to the airport property. So I don't know how long we've had it.
Are we going to ask them for payment, or is that not normally?
It's just an easement. No, we don't normally ask them for payment for an easement.
Mr. Swan?
That property was taken for back taxes probably, I'm going to say 15 to 18 years ago. Okay? And it was to eliminate the tax liability that the county has when it takes property like that. It was incorporated into the airport lands to become part of the airport, so it could become totally tax exempt. So that's the history of it.
Mr. Whitehead?
I could just add to that. It was taken from the Earltown. The person that owned Earltown and proposed all that, and when he ran into all those environmental problems with the DEC, we let it go for taxes. We ended up putting that on. The interesting thing to me is that you're giving this fellow an easement, and about, I think the Gras was still here at that time, but Mr. Macri came in, wanted to develop a industrial property that he had there, and was asking for easements, and in exchange he was going to give us the land that we ended up buying from him and are now in legal dispute with. He wanted to trade that land for an easement, and he was denied that. That would have been a good thing to do at that time, and perhaps this is also a good thing to do at this time.
Thank you. Any other comments? Mr. Wild?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. What Mr. Whitehead just said leads me to think, do we have any legal exposure for offering this easement now and not offering it prior? Does it create some kind of situation where someone can come back at us and say, hey, we asked for this, you denied it, now you're giving it to someone else? What's the reason?
Good question.
I just want to clarify, it's not the county offering him anything. He requested this easement, and no, there's no legal liability for that. You're a different board. You didn't make that decision however many years ago.
So because, so what you're saying is, because we're a different board, we're not liable for those decisions?
Correct. You have immunity as a board member.
Well, as a board member.
Right.
Well, no, I'm thinking as the county as a whole. I'm sorry, I'm not thinking
No,
about
there's
myself.
still no liability for the county. You can make a different decision.
Ms. Bramer?
Why did we not give the easement though? Is it on the same land? Is it on the same land?
I don't believe what Mr. Whitehead is referring to is the same land. It's the area, not the same piece of property.
Okay.
No.
I don't know. I don't know when he was talking about. Yeah.
It's not the same piece of property.
Not the same piece of land. Not the same piece of land.
Was the same.
Same idea, county land, but it was not the same.
Yes, but I thought he was asking for a right of way for access.
He wanted he needed a second egress in order for the.
And this is a sewer easement.
That's correct, that's correct.
So in my mind, it's definitely different.
Okay, we're getting a little, let's bring the questions to the chairman.
You have a motion.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor right now. We're having discussion. I'll allow one or two other comments for discussion. Anyone else want to have a comment on this before we vote? Mr. Kevin?
I just want to say that the piece of property that I think Travis is referring to, or the easement for Vic Macri, was through wetland back out to Quaker Road.
That's correct.
This is not wetland area. It's a piece of property, and we're only allowed 50-foot easement. You don't have to give him the easement, and I can make him cut across into Quaker Road and dig up Quaker Road to put the sewer in.
Okay, let's call the question. All in favor of this resolution?
Aye.
Say aye. Against? Passed. Okay, now we're going to go to 4-1, Buildings and Grounds with Supervisor Wild, who's been working with D&G Recycling. Mike, I'll let you, Mr.
Thank you,
Wild,
Mr.
go ahead
Chairman.
and talk to
There's,
them.
just to kind of give you a sense of where I'm going to go with this today, there's two topics that I'd like to address. One, I think, is appropriate for open session. The second is contractually related, and I think we shall eventually request to go into executive session. But the first part relates to the sale, the potential sale, and the decision that we made as a full board last month to not declare this property surplus. And I have to apologize to this committee as well as to the board for not doing my homework as well as I should have. And I know that there were some contentions raised about the assessed value versus market value. I think what's important that to move forward with that decision, if it's still a viable decision to consider selling this property, I'd like to offer, with the help of Kevin and his team, the ability to come see this property, right? To have it assessed at over $2 million and have a market value based on another valuation of $600,000. I think you'll have a better sense, if you are interested in moving forward with this, to take a look at the property, and you'll see a lot of things that are in disrepair that will take that market value even lower, and realize that it was a reasonable offer from Mr. Perkins. And in full transparency, I wanted to also comment on the comment of easements by Supervisor Strauss. It is 24 pages worth of easements, but there were only 11 actual easements in there. If you can imagine, it was a corporate attorney and he covered every base possible. But those easements were related to easements for water lines, power lines, access for trucks to get to the property, and for parking of trucks. That was the extent of the easements. In addition to that, I did reach out to Mr. Perkins. He did request his money back. I wanted to see if he was still interested in potentially moving forward with this. He did say yes. Now, and also in disclosure with that, Mr. Strauss and I've talked with his team. There is an effort undergoing by the town of Queensbury to look at and applying for a grant, if I'm not mistaken, John, to develop this brownfield, or going into phase 2 of what to do with this brownfield property. So there is another option besides selling, which would be to work with the town of Queensbury to make this happen. And there are also, based on John's and my comments, that Hercules, if I'm not mistaken, did reach out to have interest in this property. BASF, sorry. Basically, the prior owners did reach out to say that there was interest in purchasing this property, so they are fully aware of the environmental issues. Maybe we would like to pursue that. But I just wanted to get that out in the open so that everybody understood, at least my perspective, in terms of where we're going with that sale. Whether or not we want to pursue that, it's not up to me, it's totally up to the committee. But I thought I wanted to try to set the record straight on some of those issues that I was not quite prepared to do so during the board meeting. Now, with that in mind, I'm not sure if you want to have a discussion about that or not, but I do feel it's important. As part of the charter that I was asked to do was to look at what we should do with this property. Part of it had to do with the negotiating a lease with Mr. Finger. I see he's here. To be honest, I think it's important that we make a decision in terms of the way the county wants to go, because it's not fair to Mr. Finger to be up in the air in terms of what might happen with his facility and what he might like to do. So with that in mind, in terms of the basis of talking about a contract and contract negotiations, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we move to executive session to talk about the contract and how this board would like to move forward.
Is it the will of the committee to go into executive session to discuss the contract?
Second.
That's a second by Mr. Loeb. All in favor of going to executive committee to talk about the specifics of the contract, say aye.
Aye.
Against?
Opposed?
No.
Okay, so there's two opposed. By law, we have to or we don't have to go into executive session? We do have an option?
If it's a majority, if a majority voted to go into executive session, a majority of the total number, then you have to go into executive session.
Okay. I am also opposed. I think that should be open. But it is the majority of this committee to go into executive session, and we will go into executive session to discuss the contract. Okay. Executive session will start momentarily. Facilities is coming out of executive session. No action was taken. I also wanted to make an announcement that O&M has been canceled, probably due to our length, but the mayor had to get back to his town, so O&M has been canceled. No action was taken in executive session. At this stage, I'm open to any motions that any member of this committee wants to make. Otherwise, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Ms. Bramer,
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
do I have a second? Mr. McDevitt seconds that. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Committee's adjourned.